we recording?
Yeah.
All right. Hello. I am Mike Bradley.
I'm Angel Butches.
This is the Sport Education Model.
Woo. Okay, so starting with the history, the Sport Ed model was first introduced in 1994 by Daryl Siedentop, with his first book being called Sport Education Quality PE Through Positive Sport Experiences. Siedentop was strongly influenced by the Sport for All movement, which first developed in Europe, and its main aim was increasing participation in sporting activities with the belief that every individual has the right to participate in sport.
According to the Sport Ed book itself, inactivity is a major health concern resulting in rising costs of healthcare. The book explains that by getting students to value and enjoy physical activity, they are more likely to remain active into adulthood.
So, Siedentop specifically created the model, though, because he witnessed a lack of competence in physical education students, and he saw that they didn't know how to play. They needed to first develop competence, and thus the model was born. And this is partly the reason for longer seasons, like in the unit, which allows for more time to develop competence, which we will touch on later.
One of the first learning theories associated with Sport Ed is social constructivism. And one of its main features is that we have talked about in the past is the zone of proximal development. And that basically means that a lot of learning happens outside of our comfort zones. We take what we know and the background we have and try to apply it to learn new skills that we haven't yet mastered. In Sport Ed, students come with valuable prior experiences and knowledge that they can choose roles and positions on the team in which they can learn and excel the most. One of the best parts about having teams of mixed abilities in this model is that students can help each other and essentially learn from one another.
Great point, Mike. The next model is situated learning theory, and this is a theory that believes that students learn best by experiencing and being engulfed in an activity. They learn by being in gameplay and practicing in that specific situation. So, this means that learning should take place in the most authentic context as possible. And in the Sport Ed model, the 6 essential features of sport are included to do just this. And that makes the environment for learning as authentic as possible.
As you can see here are listed are the 6 features of sport that we just mentioned, and it includes seasons, team affiliation, formal competition, record keeping, culminating event, and festivity. These are the natural features of sport, and when they are included in the unit, it makes for a more authentic setting, and this lays the foundation for making a more meaningful sports person. And by including these features, this is the only model that truly builds a sense of community.
We love community.
Community.
Now, moving on to the process of teaching. Each teacher is going to deliver a unit a little differently, and that really speaks to the idea that the teacher is the curriculum. As you can see here, we have a breakdown of how Gay taught her first couple days of Sport Ed. She decided to incorporate adventure education into Sport Ed to develop team camaraderie and relationships in order to have a successful unit. Now, creating a strong foundation for each team will really lend itself to helping promote teamwork and communication later down the line.
Now, on the next 2 slides, we've listed the elements of Sport Ed that are unique to the model. And for those of you who haven't taken the class yet, it really breaks down how the model is delivered to students and is worth looking over. The first element is that the units are longer to promote competence. The teams are mixed ability and are chosen by either the teacher or the captains depending on the grade and level of maturity. Each player learns a role, and by the end of the season should have learned and done multiple roles. The games are small-sided and modified for all to play, and lastly, the teams are gradually introduced to the activity.
Next, the season typically consists of a series of competitions. There should be an odd number of teams. That way, the odd team acts as the duty team, which includes like reffing, all that good stuff. Records of the season are consistently posted for students to see. The champions of the seasons are determined by the point system, and it's important to remember that the overall winning team is not always the team who has won the most games, but instead the team who has the most points from daily teamwork, fair play, duty performance, etc. And lastly, the season ends in a culminating event that celebrates the season.
Moving on to the goals of the model, the 3 major goals that guide program development in Sport Ed model are for the student to become competent, literate, and enthusiastic players. And this means that teachers must design learning experiences that facilitate student learning in realistic settings.
So now we're going to show you a portion of two separate videos. If you'd like to watch the full videos, you're welcome to do that, but we don't have time for that. So the first video is of a teacher talking about their experience with sport ed. That's not there. Perfect. And how they implemented it. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this video.
Hey, I'm Joey from thephysicaleducator.com, and for this week's Tube Tuesday video, I'd like to talk to you all about a sport education unit that I planned a few years back. That was a lot of fun to teach, and the kids really enjoyed it. Now, this is my take on sport education. It may not be the full version, but I'd still like to go over and just give you an idea about how I did it. Now, just to give you a bit of a background as to why I went the sport education route, when I was at McGill in my last year, I had a final field placement to do, and I was lucky enough to get placed at l'École secondaire de Chambly, which is my old high school here in the city of Chambly in Quebec. Now, Chambly is not what you'd call a full-out high school. Instead, it's a junior high school, which means it only offers grades 7, 8, and 9. Now, when I was there, I never taught grade 7, but I did teach 2 grade 8 classes and 9 grade 9 classes. And of my 9 grade 9 classes, there was one class that was special. That was special because it was part of this program called the Sports Plus program. Now, as opposed to regular grade 9 classes who only had 2 periods of phys ed on a 9-day cycle, students in the Sports Plus program had 6 periods of phys ed on a 9-day cycle, which means I got to see them a lot more. So I figured with all of this extra phys ed, why not do a sport education season? So that's what I did. Here's how. In the first class of the
Okay, so in that video, you might have caught that he only implemented it with one of his classes, and that's a class that he saw more than the rest, and it's because this model takes a considerable amount of time, and that's something that should be considered when implementing it. So now into the next video, and this video is a real-life example of a teacher explaining the general basics of a sport ed model to his students as he introduces the unit to them for the first time.
Alright, we're going to start a different thing in PE today. We're going to start something called Sport Education Model. That's where we're going to pick a particular sport. It's basketball season right now, and we're going to kind of go through a season as a class. So it's basketball season, so we're going to use basketball. You get to be more involved with the sport. You get to play. Some of you will get to be the captain or the coach of your team. You get to pick your team name, and some of you will get to referee, some of you will get to keep score. So you are involved in practice, and you'll get to play, and we'll have a postseason. We'll kind of have a tournament there at the end. We'll have one champion, all right? We will have a preseason where you get to practice with your team. You can come up with plays. Your coach is in charge of whatever you're doing at practice. You get to come up with plays. You can work on shooting, anything. All right, that'll be kind of preseason. Then we'll have a regular season where you'll get to play all the teams, and then whoever has the best record and stuff will have a postseason, a tournament style. Each game will be a half-court play. All right, we'll play on these 2 main goals when you're playing, and then when we have the championship game, we'll play full court. All right, I've already divided up the teams, and I've already picked the captains, so we'll just get started with that. All right.
All right, so moving into the standards, originally Sport Ed was all about Standard 1, but it's kind of been developed and changed. The way now the teacher is the curriculum. When we had it, Gay modified this how the season progressed. She added in adventure education elements to make it more Standard 4 focused season. Standard 3 addressed heavily as the students build warm-up plans, practice plans, and game plans, addressing the needs and weaknesses of their own team that must be addressed. And then Standard 4 addressed throughout as students must work together not just as a team to reach goals, but also address conflict within the team and how issues will be handled.
So moving on to assessments, because of how the model is laid out, teachers have significantly more time to watch and evaluate students using assessments, and this means that the students are getting more feedback in order to be better.
In the Sport Ed book, it shows some assessment options that align well with the model. These include checklists, rating scales, homework, peer and self assessments, and many more.
Many more. So, as most of you probably know, the Sport Ed book is a really great resource for finding assessments and explains how to deliver it to students. So, here is one assessment. Hopefully, you can see that pretty well. Um, of and I just liked it because they use a pedometer count as a way to track physical activity levels, but also deliver points to the students in the season. And also, just feel free to pause this video if you'd like to look at the assessments longer.
This next assessment is an example of a teacher assessment that can be used to track fair play points for each team using this system. Just tracking it throughout the season.
Yep, and you can do it for multiple teams. Okay. Moving back, and then there's also more assessments, as you can see, that you can find in the book. So, here we go. All of the aspects of self-determination theory fit within Sport Ed. Competence is taught through the lessons and information which is delivered to the teams to be learned in their groups. The teacher carefully guides the students in a way that allows them to guide themselves, which is where autonomy comes into play and really shines in this model. Student groups are led from within by coaches, trainers, managers. Their learning feels self-guided because they're running their own team. Care must be taken to ensure that they are given enough freedom to feel this autonomy, but also enough teacher intervention that critical elements are still taught. Relationships are built amongst the teams as they operate much like a real team or community, relying on each other and everyone within the team to complete their assigned task.
All right. So the first article that we looked at by Chu, I think is how you would say that, was a review of 18 different articles, all focused on Sport Ed as related to high school physical education classes and how they related to both social determinant theory and achievement goal theory. The collection of their findings suggested that Sport Ed programs generally facilitate a mastery climate and student feelings of competence, autonomy, and relatedness than a traditional PE setting, which in turn facilitates more self-determined students. The collection of their research proves that Sport Ed leads to improved motivational outcomes in PE based both on social determinant theory and achievement goal theory. The second article by Smither and Zhu focused on the outcomes of high school students participating in a Sport Ed model with smaller teams and fewer roles. The study consisted of one teacher and 70 ninth grade students. For 8 weeks, they observed classes 2 to 3 times per week, as well as conducting 4 to 6 informal interviews with 12 students. 2 themes were found. First, sport education transforms students from passive learners into active learners, reflected in team autonomy and problem solving. The second, that smaller teams produced higher engagement, especially in those students who rarely participate in traditional team sport unit. The results point to the importance of team autonomy and problem-solving opportunities that transform students into active learners.
All right, so what's so special about this model? Well, sport education teaches the whole student, and research from over 50 different studies describes the benefits of using the model. Things like general increases in student enthusiasm. All genders reported working harder in Sport Ed. There was the lower skilled students particularly benefited and reported appreciation for teammates who encouraged and supported their development. Students liked the longer seasons because they had more time to learn the activity and more time to play it. And most students reported that they had improved in terms of developing better techniques and applying tactics.
Now, for critiques of the model, it requires student maturity and responsibility to be successful. The students aren't doing their jobs or can't handle their responsibilities, don't care to do them. The model it's not going to be very successful. Losing can foster stressful competitive environments and team conflict, so the environment in which it's run has to be managed carefully. The longer sports season can disengage those who do not like a particular sport. So because you have to spend more time in it, if there's a student who already doesn't like it, they're just going to get more and more disengaged as you go. The students who are of a higher ability will end up playing most of the sport, so dominant play really needs to be watched for and controlled. And students may feel as though you know they aren't as skilled, so do not want to put in loads of effort if they are not going to be appreciated for it, even if they have actually improved a lot more than others in the class.
And here are our references. And that's for Zoom. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the later time.